ino Kenya twaitire thakame tukingata muthungu.
Thank you mwana muthikiriria wakwa uyu ni Ruth Ngeseni na njokete nigetha tunyitanire nawe tabarire no njega muno ya kirira mitugo na unduire witu. Ngai mutura muoyo arogocwo.
Thai thathaia Ngai witu thai. Njitagwo Marilyn Wanjiru mucera wa bari ya Gathogo. Na hena kiuria kimwe ndire madam niki gitumaga gwakinya hindi no mweri uyu kugie na accident nyingi uguo.
Riu muthikiriria nio na nie ndireyuria kiuria kiu na nitwagirirwo ithuothe gwicokera nigetha twiyuria atiriri angikorwo mweri uyu riu turi wa December ukire na thiguku iria riu thi yothe igeretie gukumia muno na igacoka gakorwo majabu ni ati thiguku yo ndiri thiine wa kirikaniro tugacoka tukona atiriri undu ta ugwati ugakorwo rekereirio ithui andu othe hakuhi athi mweri-ini uyu riu nie ni kwiyuria ndireyuria na ngwici andu othe meyurie tondu riria riothe tweka wega Ngai ndaturehagira mitino ri niki kiratuma hindi yothe December andu mari harakati-ini cia guthie thiguku ino makoragwo ni ikuo cia nginya hakuhi family yothe mundu eyurie icoke urore atiriri thiguku ino Marilyn ndiri thiine wa kirikaniro gikoro kana kieru hatire handu iri no ri watuiria ri kihumo kiayo ri ukona kiri na nganja twiri andu othe ithwe turi muoyo to gutire mundu utendete ugima mwega wa mwiri ri tukona mogwati maria mokaga mweri-ini uyu koguo ri giki ni kendo andu othe magirwo gwika research ngoro-ini ciao na meyurie ni kindu kiegae kana ni kindu kiuru tondu riri nironekana kionereria gikionania undu muru na koguo ri nikio tugaga ithwe riria turi unduire-ini Ngai aturute nguma ukombo-ini wa witikio
niguo
ndikanae gukorwo hihi ni kindu gitari kiega icoke na riu andu othe mathire hau makorwo ni gikuo gitarathira no mweri ucio wathira ri gugacoka wega na nigetha umenyetie ati ni andu oti makorwo magitengera December ri January ri na andu makorwo magicoka cereria mawira-ini ri na ciana cigithie cukuru ri tukionaga tu Ngai atugite
na January ona tutionaga
mitino mene
na ni maundu maya mothe turona ri ni marathie magitwaranaga na ni urona nginya president yakiaria uhoro wa maundu ma security maria mangihutia githurano gitu na riu madam uri ukoretwo ugitufundithia ati maundu maya mothe ni manyitanu ri
niguo Marilyn maundu maya mothe turona thiini wa bururi ni manyitanu maundu maria mothe nginya twiriga kwirwo ha ni Dr. Horowitz uhoro wa njanjo ati njanjo ni cire cia huthika kurehe murimo ta HIV Ebola cancer na mirimu ingi mingi iria iratugia nginya thaici na nginya na maundu maria riu turona ma microwave tari uria twerirwo atiriri Litton Bionetics ni contractor wa guthondeka indo cia mbara ni contractor wa maundu megie mbara na ukaigwa niwe wathondekire microwave ino andu mekiraga irio nawe ni contractor wa indo cia mbara indi ciothe ri uradeal na mundu wa mbara ri oe mbara we ona wiri na wega ri we no akorwo giciria iriri ogarehe maundu maya mothe ni manyitanite na waigua uria president arauga ri akauga ati andu anja ni marageria muno uria maguthukia bururi uyu ni undu wa githurano gia 2017 ri tondu ndu uyu ni ugite maita maingi muno ni erega gwita magavana ningi akimahe o ndeto icio ni erega ningi guthie akiraga andu othe athirikari na riu ni okani atwira ndindi no turareja muhuri riu one kuga atiriri mundu wothe angikara nderi riu we niwe wahitie tondu hindi ciothe andu magirwo guthikagiriria uria president arauga tondu kuu ni kuo bururi urorete na ni arakiugire atiriri ona igoti ria ICC ni mahe ni koguo ri igoti ria ICC ni ria UN angikorwo kindu kinene ta ICC ni kireranirwo ni andu aingi mari thi makauga hari na maheni ri ngithe ndugukiona nginya urumwe wa mabururi ukiriona nganja na niguo naguo riri niguo uri urugamirire ndawa cio rigitani cia thi ukamara ukaigua tundu ta tu uguo riu ri maundu maya mothe ni manyitanu na no mathiaga ningi mecamanio iyo magathie makauga atiriri ati thi inyihio urugari na nukta igiri riu kunyihia ri ni guka kugumbira andu na kindu ta matu na kendo kiu kihana ta mature ngai ni arauga atiriri ni gakorwo ruri runene muno hari mbara area igakorwo yangu wa mangu tondu arauga atiriri ni agoka humbire bururi ta matu no thutha wa miaka mingire ni mwaka ngai agoka niguo koguo ri haha ri andu maikare moyo uguo na nikio Marilyn ndirageria gucokia andu kuri maundu maria mangirehe ugwati riria president araugire ati mabururi ma nanja ni marageria gutuma githurano githie na mwena uria marenda riu ri undu ucio no utume ona ithue gukorwo ringi turi na mogwati maratuma wone andu ni marorwo ni mioyo nigetha riri andu acio mahane ta gwikati na undu ungi microwave ici no muhaka cirutwo nguma booster-ini Marilyn na twathi kuhoya andu mahoye undu ucio wikike tondu microwave icio no cirare cigitucina citucine ciekirwo miaki mingi citucine nginya na hindi ya guthie kura ri twikore tutirahota na guthie na maguru na nwarora ri kundu kuria guothe kwana kura cia Jubilee nginya Nairobi ri kundu kuu ni kwerekeirio microwave nyingi muno tari ndirare mero Marilyn ndadete guthiuruka kirima wahituka mero tauni ri ndugwithie makutano yao hau mwena ucio wa umothori gatauni ni o hau ri iri na microwave nene nginya cigakorwo ta futinya warie tondu ni cia githiururi na ciekure iguru ta ithatu nene pio ati ona kindu kiu kingioka kiigirwo pick up inere ni aihora na ni andu cierekeirio uguo niguo ru ndiranda gukwira no andu acio ni wahori kura tukuhoya ngai na muthikiriria tugacamania Kirinyaga tariki 27 December ni uraigwa president ni araria mono na akauga andu mahoere bururi tondu riri ninge tuga tutige guthie githurano ri ninge no thina tuga tuthie githurano ri hau naho andu makona niho gacuba-ini haria gacekeheire ri hau niho tungi gutha bururi uyu na wangire maraheneka mageciria ati mari na nyakero ni andu aroraga mari othe tondu microwave no ngera gecira ndi mundu wakia magigana wahitukira withe to urakigia na cancer thiku ici ni urona nginya uria mundu araigwa maitho aya thiku ici ni urona nginya andu ni maraturwo ni magego na hatire handu enjekete igego nona ni uraigwa andu makirio ni mutwe na kunyota maundu maya no tuko witu uria wari mwega andu makomaga mundu ngeraugire ati madam ko tangira andu utuko twikite ta wa shaitani andu mataragikoma
ino na tania enderega rura gugakia gukagia githagathago we ukegarura ukagugakia gugakia rugo gitukire ni kihona kaba kongire muthenya ukirute wira
no gugakia ri ukahona
wakeru ukagira ukaigwa muthenya kariguo uranyitwo ni gatono
ni ndirakwira atiriri tondu andu aya ni andu oru mono ri kwi machini cirakanio pio utuko gatagati kuga mamuthikiriria utuko ni otwikite murito muno no gwakia ri ukahona na nie njoetu tugereire ugitiri-ine wa ngai tondu ona ithwe gukorwo tu ati ni ithwe turathi kunina mwaka ri ni kiama kia ngai Marilyn ni kiama kia ngai na tutikage kuhoya ni tuthathaie ngai uma tondu ona riu thaici haha turiri ni kiama giake ati turi muoyo tobangirwo uru muno
na president ri ndaragia maundu uguo gutuhuka uhoro akiaria hena undu uria akoragwo onete na uria akoragwo oi koguo nie ngwenda kwira andu aitu maundu maria president araria ri tumoe na hinya tumoe no ritu ria magirwo gukuona
riu ri warning icio president araruta ri andu magirwo kumioe na nikiugo kiria ndiranyitire kia bata muno ati koro we ni woracunga brother yaku na riu muthikiriria ni undu wa nie ngigeria gutimiza uria president araugire ati menyerera mukenya uria ungi o tari brother yaku na sister yaku nikio muthikiriria ni ndirenda muno unyite uria Dr. Horowitz eriga gutwira tondu mogwati matua gukari nigetha manine andu kana manyihie andu nigetha kura cinyihe ri mogwati macio no moke mari na maheni no ukioreherwo irio na cigakorwo ni irio njuru ni uguka ugekirwo indo booster-ine wicirite ni cia thimo ni indo njuru ni uguka ukaro na cindano ugeciria ati ni njanjo njega muno ni amariria ndikarwara mariria mingi ni hindi oru ni hindi waingira thina-ini thina uria munene koguo ri nikio ndirenda andu maelewe wega fiu na riu muthikiriria githikiriria wira uyu wa Dr. Horowitz uria twambiriirie kiumia githiru nigetha uhinguke matu biu na ni arauga wagia na matu na uigua uria arauga ri ni ukuhona no okorwo ndukuigua ugwikora gatagati ka mutondo utangiuma tondu nginya cancer ri iratuika iraheanwo na njanjo ni erega kuga haha atiriri HIV ri yathondekirwo nguma kuri cancer mithemba mingi lymphoma cancer, leukemia cancer, indo icio ciothe nicio virus icio nicio cia mutatagwo cigwo cenjanio cigagarũranio nginya giuka kindu gitagwo atiriri immune ravaging virus super germ etagwo HIV nayo ni mari andu aria maturaga na andu aria maturaga ni makandarathi na ndagitari Dr. Gallo mena kandarathi wetagwo Linton Bionetics nio mathondekire na nio mandikaga mandiko macio mathondeka kinaki no riri no acio Linton nio ambere thini wa America makome muthitari wa mbere muno guthondeka microwave cia irio na o makoro me kandarathi cia indo cia mbara koguo ri ona riria mundu arona satellite dish neneri no kindu kia mbara onengeretwo na njira ya maheni ukaiga hau gikamurika handu kiraruta thitima tondu kundu kuingi kuria kwekirwo ma satellite dish macio manene ri mbura yorire tureure ne twari horo wa Narok to gutire mundu to igwaturaga ngano nyingi muno aya haha susu gugia ko icio igire emwerorete no thinengi ati South mbura nayo ekiura muthikiriria githie na mbere guthikiriria uria ndagitari Dr. Horowitz arauga na nierutire muno na niwe wekire research na ni mundu muthomu muno thine wa YouTube wetagwo The True Origins of AIDS and Ebola Virus na nowe wandikite tena ifuku Emerging Viruses akauga atiriri kuri na virus nyingi ciroka thiku ici no ni cia guthondekwo ti ati ni murimo wari kuo tondu na mirimo iyo imwe turero ri Africa ndiri ya guona no hindi ciothe murimo wathondekwo uratwika umite Africa gutumenithiriria kuri andu athi tondu riria wero HIV umite Africa mundu ndarakuona uria kuonaga mbere oko ni Ebola igatwika mundu muiro hare hothe ari ena murimo okorwo ni mirimo ino ingi yothe ina virus na cancer ukaigirirwo horo wa Zika ati umete Africa chikunyunya ati umete Africa malaria maundu macio mothe nginya we ukagariri thine wathi muthikiriria to kwamba toigue gatengo kanini karia Dr. Horowitz aririe kiumia githiru na gatiaiguikire wega riera-ini na ni gatengo karia arauga atiriri akiheana mathomo make mbere ya athomi aingire ni akimerire uria utuiria wake wothe uhana na kauga atiriri ati kindu kiria kandarathi acio akijeshi hamwe na Dr. Gallo mathondekaga ri makoragwo mehithite thine wa Cancer Research Center na akauga atiriri virus iyo mathondekire ri ya leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma cancer virus na ni complex iriho na iyo ri niyo yaheanwo ri yatuthukirie murimo wa HIV thine wa 1978 no virus ino ndiari kuo tene ino virus ino ekuite leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, cancer complex ndiari ho mbere iyo no uria yothe ihana ri iyo niyo HIV ere yatuthukire 1978.
So, but anyway, I had the privilege of presenting this research in front of some of the world's leading epidemiologists and AIDS experts and virologists who came to my presentation, many of them, and so they were arguing with me. Some of them said, well, so what, Dr. Horowitz? So were working on reverse transcriptase at that time. That doesn't mean anything. I said, okay, I can appreciate that. And I showed them the congressional record, and they said, oh, that is interesting that they're sixth on the list of major Army biological weapons contractors. And I showed them the other material that I just showed you about combining monkey viruses and cat, and they said, oh, that is very strange. How do we know you're not telling us falsehoods? How do we know you're not making this up? I said, well, if you truly are interested, you can look up my references, which I have both in the book and in this paper. You can look it up for yourselves. And I then handed them a government document, which explains exactly what I'm about to show you here. And I said, you read this. And then he answer me this question, whether or not you think this might be risky to humanity. And I'll ask you the same question, and you see how you vote. Here's what they're doing. Besides biological weapons contractors, they are also working under the cover of National Cancer Institute research. They are also investigating whether viruses cause cancer in humans. They weren't sure, or at least they said that they weren't sure. I suspect now they were pretty sure. They also wanted to study whether vaccines could prevent viral-induced cancers. And here, in this particular study, they were looking at whether they could diagnose these viruses in the human tissues early in order to prevent them. You know, like breast screenings or pap screenings, pap smears, where if you identify a problem early enough, you can perhaps save a life. Hey, we can't fault these folks for doing that type of research. But here, the question is, do you think this type of research is risky? To begin, to develop an alternative approach for the detection of possible human leukemia viruses. They begin with a mouse sarcoma virus that caused sarcoma cancers in mice. And they recombined it with a mouse leukemia virus to create a mouse leukemia sarcoma virus hybrid that they then inoculated into healthy cats to get it to jump species from mouse to cat. Now they had a mouse leukemia sarcoma virus that was infectious for cats, which they then inoculated into a cat suffering from feline leukemia, cat leukemia. And you know what? Success! It worked, they reported. Next step, they report, take the same mutant hybrid, culture it through human embryonic cells, and then get it to jump species, therefore, to humans, and then try it on a human being suffering with leukemia. Now, how many of you, raise your hands if you think that this might be risky to the human race? Raise your hands. Okay, well, we got 100% in that question. I want you to know that although most of you represent a lay audience, there's some health professionals, health scientists perhaps here, but I want you to know that you concur with some of the world's leading AIDS epidemiologists, virologists, and cancer virus experts, who, when I showed them this and they read this, many of them, most of them, shook their heads. Some of them said, this is extremely risky. Some of them said, I can't believe they were doing this. This is mad. So this is what they were doing. Now, this was my thesis. I presented it. And one of the smoking guns in the book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola, was that the specific cancer virus immune suppression complex that these people spent most of their time and money studying during the highly funded and mostly secret special virus cancer program. Those of you who have been in the military know the word special means. It means covert, secret, virus, cancer program. What they were studying mostly was the immune suppression, leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, cancer complex that never existed on planet Earth in human beings before 1978 with the outbreak of the first AIDS cases in New York and simultaneously Central Africa.
Na virus yore leo niyo HIV. Muthikiriria Dr. Horowitz agothio na mbere kuga uria oririe kiuria ndagitari uria wathondekire murimo uyu wa HIV etagwo Dr. Robert Gallo. Na riu ri akumuria kiuria atiriri kana ni araririkana thiine wa 1970 akirugama mbere ya jeshi ya NATO akiheana wira wake uria mathiete na mbere kuruta wegie virus iria mathondekete kuri NATO military scientists in Belgium. Yani kuri anene aita riria retagwo NATO riria njirega kumwira haha ni ya mabururi maria ma Jafethi maria manyakero mothe kuria rugongo nio mathondekete itariu na itariu nirio ithue tuwe tuonire UN ikirekereria rihure Gaddafi na rikamuraga na ngikwira itariu nirihutanitie na UN riu ni wakeigwa ninge mundu uyu rathondeka murimo uyu ri ninge ni igwika ati hare na proof na document ati ni athire kuheana oral presentation to NATO military scientists kiu ngigukwira atia muthikiriria ati maundu maya mothe ni manyitanu itari ria NATO ri rirokira ku na bacteria ithondeketwo ni aya itangikorwo nio matumanite nikio rathi kuheana presentation mbere yao. Wehuge. Otoria ninge ngatheti ya Standard iria turiga guthoma haha uria yaugire ati jeshi ya Amerika niyo yahusikaga na njanjo ya HIV kuria Thailand. US Military HIV Research Program niyo yahuthikaga kuheana njanjo kuria Thailand. Riu koguo ni wanyitithania jeshi ici ciothe ni cirahusikana murimo uyu. Niagugithie na mbere augia atiriri thina ona munene waumirire riria mundu uria waheirwo wira aciarithanie njanjo eyo ri iria riu ninge ri kuratuika kwari na virus njuru thiine wa njanjo eyo. Akiuga arenda njanjo 200,000 na hindi iyo ri makianjia guthi gucanja ciana iria citakoragwo na mutwe mwega thibitari-ini magakua magathi nginya kuria njera magacanja andu magakua na riu ri mahindio marakua nikito maraheo hepatitis B riu magakua aria matigarire ri matigire gukua ri nio thakame yao yoirwo igitwarwo kuri kambuni ya guthi guthondeka njanjo na yeta andu acio already ni mari na HIV virus icio. Ninge akarekereria kauga atiriri Cancer Research Center ithatu kuria Uganda ri kundu gutiganeire ri nikuo maumire hau nja tondu njanjo ino ya hepatitis B ri niyo yakuite nginya murimo wa cancer niyo yakuite riu murimo wa HIV tondu HIV roneka yathondekirwo nguma kuri cancer nyingi na gakigweta wega fiu ati hau nja ya research center icio cia Uganda ri niho Africa yahereirwo HIV na gutiare murimo tocio guku. Africa tiyo yene murimo ucio wa HIV ni wene aya maroka gutongorio ningu na itariu ndaigua taririo riria Ngai aragio horo wari tondu ni itaria mabururi maingi makanyitana mangu reke tucamanie Kirinyaga tuhoe tondu riu we gutiri undu onomwe utoe nigetha tuhoe Ngai witu ateithie thi yothe na tuteithie ithui guku Kenya na Afrika yake ciana cia Abrahamu.
I was in town doing radio interviews, as I said, in Canada, and there was a documentary film crew filming a vaccine documentary that asked if they could film my interview with Fanny Kiefer, one of Vancouver's leading talk show hosts. And I said, sure, be happy, come on. So the producer came up to me and said, Dr. Horowitz, did you know that Dr. Robert Gallo is in town this week? Indeed, he's giving a public forum, public presentation. Would you like to come and ask Dr. Gallo a question? I asked Dr. Gallo the following question. I said, Dr. Gallo, are you at all concerned that your early research using monkey viruses like SV40 and others and recombining these with things like feline leukemia virus RNA and chicken leukemia sarcoma virus RNA might have given rise to the AIDS virus or AIDS virus relatives that might have contaminated chimpanzees and rhesus monkeys shipped by your colleagues from Lytton Bionetics to the vaccine manufacturers at Merck Sharp and Dohme. Adamson, Herrera, Gallo et al. Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, 1970. In fact, Dr. Gallo, you might recall, were presenting this paper orally in front of NATO military scientists in Mol, Belgium. That's enough, that's enough. He says, but I want you to know that NATO funds all sorts of meetings about motherhood, fatherhood, sisterhood, and brotherhood. And we were never really doing that type of research. I said, excuse me, Dr. Gallo, how about the Sarin, Gallo et al., where you published in Nature New Biology, recombining these different types of viruses to study the unique immune suppression, leukemia, lymphoma, sarcoma, complex models? So Gallo doesn't like that. 3 minutes later, my phone rings. I pick up the phone. This is Gallo. So I said, Dr. Gallo, do you mind if we record this conversation? He says, for what purpose? I say, for publication purposes, of course. And I found myself in the role of an investigative reporter. And he says, okay. So I begin to record his chief objections to my thesis. And I want you to know, after studying those objections, they are completely and utterly bogus. Scientifically indefensible, and I've got the hard documents to prove that. He would be laughed out of any scientific symposium inquiry into the issue. And I said, but Dr. Gallo, don't you think that something like this was possible? Not necessarily in your lab. He says, okay, I do not argue with you. I will not argue with you. It's possible. Then he says, but I could tell you even more plausibly how something like this could have happened by accident at that time. World-leading AIDS expert says the epidemic might have been an accident. Well, I never heard back from him until I want you to know that virtually everything that you know about the AIDS epidemic is a complete deception. In fact, I want you to know that virtually everything you know about everything is a complete deception. To introduce this most horrifying segment where I'm going to share with you how the vaccine was developed that most plausibly delivered AIDS to the world and who did it. Just to give you a sense of how deceived you have been, you remember the phrase, the AIDS virus doesn't discriminate, and the propaganda message is that you and I are to believe that white people get it as much as black people, that gay get it as much as straight, that rich versus poor, people all over the world, Africans, same as other countries, Europeans. Well, remember a couple years ago they even said that white women aged 23 to 35 were the fastest growing risk group for HIV/AIDS infection. How many remember hearing that? That's wonderful CDC propaganda, a complete distortion of the data. They twist the data, deliver it as a political message, therefore it becomes bogus science. Garbage. This is what they do. They take it out of context. I want you to know that the AIDS virus discriminates. I want you to know that the AIDS virus discriminates even in the high-risk populations. To prove my point, I'll take this from the American Journal of Public Health. This is one of thousands of studies that you can evaluate this information, the same information in. And this is a study of HIV antibody prevalence among IV drug abusers in 6 U.S. regions. Now, with IV drug use, what are you told? You're told that the risk is those bloody needles, aren't you? You share those bloody needles, you get a little blood transferred, virus transferred, you got AIDS. Now here, take a look at this. In blue is the percentage of people who share their bloody needles. In red are the people who are positive. Now, you see in San Antonio, Texas, 99% of those people who use IV drugs share their bloody works. In other words, these are the dumbest IV drug users in the country. Okay? But despite that massive ignorance, only 2% carry the AIDS virus. That's interesting. You know, same level of ignorance almost in San Francisco, where it jumps up to 10%. And you see in Baltimore, Maryland, all of a sudden it jumps up to 29%. So that, you know, any epidemiologist with any remaining common sense. Now I know that in Epidemiology 101, that's one of the prerequisites. You have to give up your common sense. But anyone with any remaining common sense might think, well, maybe something strange was happening in New York. What might that be? And you see here in Denver, it drops down again. And here you have in Tampa, Florida, far smarter IV drug users, far less share their bloody needles. No, nobody's carrying the AIDS virus there. But look in New York, the Big Apple, where you've got the smartest IV drug users in the United States. They all must have gone to Rockefeller University. But despite that massive intelligence, a whooping 61% carry the AIDS virus. Now, anyone with any common sense would have to suggest, well, something strange might have been happening in New York. What was happening in New York? And particularly what was happening in New York, let's say 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years before the AIDS epidemic broke in 78 in New York City. But what was happening in New York? This is a United States government document. You're looking at a document from the National Cancer Institute monograph of 1974. Wherein over New York City you see what a square, that square is over also Central Africa, Uganda. And that square, according to the legend here, is liver cancer virus research. Liver cancer virus research they're studying. And you see herpes type viruses. There's a star. The stars are in northwest Uganda, which is where Lytton Bionetics research labs are in collaboration with the International Association for Research in Cancer. And in southeast Uganda, another star for herpes-type viruses. That's where Lytton Bionetics' monkey colonies were. And you see the same star over Bethesda, Maryland, where Lytton Bionetics research labs were in the United States. Herpes B viruses. By the way, how many of you remember late 70s, all of a sudden, you saw herpes becoming a big deal? Front page of Time and Look magazine, you said, you know, herpes is a sexually transmitted disease, and who did they blame? They blamed the hippies. You know, the love generation. And then also, herpes viruses, by the way, include simian cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr viruses, herpes B viruses, which now have been linked to sarcoma cancer development and definitively chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, which of course coincidentally came out on planet Earth in 1978 in humans, the same exact year that the AIDS epidemic broke. Interesting. Now you're going to see how this happened. So these people wanted to study. This horrifying story goes back to 1965, when Saul Krugman from the New York University Medical Center. Where did you see that word? New York University Medical Center. Right, on the congressional record. Another documented biological weapons contractor for the Department of Defense, Litton Bionetics and New York University Medical Center. There, a fellow by the name of Saul Krugman, who was being paid by the Army to investigate hepatitis B viruses, which he believed, and his colleagues did too, were cancer viruses. That besides liver cirrhosis and liver inflammation, this cancer virus would cause liver cancer. So he wanted to study this in the human population. Trouble is, how many fools do you know are going to volunteer for this? Not too many. So these people covertly volunteer a very unique human population. Try Willowbrook State School mentally retarded children on Staten Island in New York. And in 1965, these people began to inoculate children at Willowbrook with these hepatitis B viruses. And of course, many of the children died. And over the 5-year period, 65 to 70, Saul Krugman and his colleagues had tried various heat-treated vaccines on these kids. And if they tried it and the kids died, their attitude was, oh, shucks, we'll just have to heat it up a little bit more and try it again. And that research continued to 1970, when he felt that he was close to developing a vaccine to prevent hepatitis, and he now hands the project over to the world's leading vaccine developer for the world's largest pharmaceutical company in the world, Merck, Sharp, and Dohme, which, by the way, have direct connections to IG Farben and the Third Reich. So Maurice Hilleman is the fellow who Robert Gallo tells me about when I call him several weeks ago. He says, after having read the book, have you heard the good news? I said, no, I haven't. He says, you know that fellow who you heavily implicate in your book, Emerging Viruses, AIDS, and Ebola, Maurice Hilleman? I said, yes. He says, well, President Clinton has just announced he's about to reward Hilleman with a Presidential Medal of Honor for his service to American medical science and military science. My response was, I'm sure Hilleman's elated. Here's Hilleman's story. So Hilleman takes over for Krugman, wants to expand the study to include 200,000 human doses of the 1974 experimental hepatitis B vaccine. To do that, you need a lot of help and a lot of viruses. So, who does he get to help him? Why, his good friends and colleagues at the Centers for Disease Control. Why, you know those disease cowboys, those disease busters who are, putting their lives on the line to help you by going to the Ebola region of Zaire and, without gloves and masks. They're going through the forest, picking up animals all over the place and insects without gloves and masks, looking for the Ebola virus. Right, I'll believe that. But yet most people do when they see that on television, like CNN showed that. And they get the disease people from the Food and Drug Administration, the infectious disease people from the FDA. You know who those people are, don't you? Those are the wonderful people who want to regulate your botanicals and healing herbs and take your vitamins off the market, or standardize them at least, in accordance with now a new set of regulations coming around us from the backside through GATT treaty, from the World Health Organization, the Rockefeller-funded World Health Organization, you see, where now, a couple of years ago, we defeated the efforts to take our vitamins away from us because our movie stars got involved. Well, over the next couple years, you will find that it's not going to be so easy, because this time they're going to come at you with GATT sanctions, international sanctions they will take against the United States if we do not fall into line. That's how they've done it and are doing it now. So the FDA, these wonderful people who want to do all this to our vitamins, and if you're able to get vitamins after this goes into effect, like, for example, a good multivitamin should have at least 200 to 400 international units of vitamin E, good D-alpha tocopherol, not mixed, not manufactured, not synthetic, but pure. If you will get that, you will have to pay probably 10 to 20 times as much, and you'll have to have a physician, you have to go see the doctor for a signature on that. That's what's in the works right now. These are the people who put on the fast track for testing and approval AZT, 3TC, protease inhibitors, DDI, DZC, which most plausibly are killing far more people than the AIDS virus is. But they want to pull your vitamins off yourselves. So they get the FDA and the National Institute for Allergies and Infectious Diseases. Then these three government agencies, along with Merck Sharp and Dohme, the world's leading pharmaceutical company, develop 200,000 human doses in 4 lots of a contaminated hepatitis B vaccine. Now, here's how they did it. They tried to grow enough viruses. They needed a lot of viruses, I told you. They tried to grow these viruses in the children. It wouldn't work. Oh, couldn't grow enough in the kids. They then tried to grow it in cell culture. Wouldn't grow there either. They needed something live to grow it in. So they ultimately selected rhesus monkeys and chimpanzees. Heavily contaminated rhesus monkeys and chimpanzees supplied by Lytton Bionetics researchers. How do I know that? Well, I've got their contract. Now, how do we know that they were contaminated? Well, these researchers themselves said that 70% of their caged laboratory animals were environmentally contaminated with hepatitis B viruses and a whole assortment of other viruses, which we know now included cytomegalo, Epstein-Barr, the herpes-type viruses, and another unique enzyme-associated virus, reverse transcriptase-associated virus, that unique enzyme that makes the AIDS virus tick, was in a virus also there in simian foamy retroviruses that were also contaminated in these animals. So here's how they made the vaccine now. They grew the hepatitis B viruses in these contaminated animals. When they had grown enough, they extracted the viruses out of them. Now, when you extract a live virus out of a live contaminated animal, all of the other viral contaminants come with it. And now they inoculated this entire viral mishmash, this mixture, into the children, into the gay men in New York City, and into the blacks in Central Africa, Eastern Zaire, and Northwest Uganda. And into the blacks in Central Africa, Eastern Zaire, and Northwest Uganda. Now, of course, many of these people died, but the ones that lived had developed antibodies. It was these people who lived, whose blood they took. And they shipped the blood to Merck Sharp and Dohme Laboratory, where they separated the serum from the whole cell fractions. And it was from that serum, that heavily contaminated serum. And also, to make it even worse, these people had 10 years previously received the Salk and Sabin vaccines, which were heavily contaminated with monkey viruses. So they were human incubation chambers, like at least 25% of this audience, with monkey viruses in their human bodies. And so they took their blood. And it was from this that they made the first 4 lots of 1974 experimental hepatitis B vaccine containing 200,000 human doses that they then inoculated, once again, in the different regions of the world, principally New York and Central Africa. Now this, what I just told you, to make a long story short, I could spend an hour explaining it, literally is the only theory that has been advanced so far on the origin of AIDS that reconciles and integrates all of the scientific, documented, and confirmed facts. Now, why can I stand before you so clear and so sure of what I'm telling you is the gospel? Well, because I found the contracts. I found the contracts. You know how I found the contracts? God's grace. In fact, what you're looking at here is the contract under which numerous AIDS-like and Ebola-like viruses were developed. You see, then this is Robert C. Gallo, from the project officer from the National Cancer Institute. Here's Robert Ting. See, John Landon was director of Bionetics Research Labs, National Institute of Health contract number 712025. It was entitled The Investigation of Viral Carcinogenesis in Primates. That's cancer production through viral infection in monkeys and humans. And you look at the date that they started, those in the front can see, February 12, 1962. And you see how much they were paid was $2.153 million. Oh, there it is. It's upside down. Sorry about that. That fell out the other day. $2.153 million. That's what is on the contract summary report. $2.153 million. Now, that document reconciled the document that initiated my investigation. Because remember when we began, I said to you that it was the National Academy of Sciences National Research Council in 1969 informed the Department of Defense that for $2 million a year over 5 years they could develop these immune system ravaging microorganisms for germ warfare. Remember I said that? How was it, you might ask, that the National Academy of Sciences knew that it would take $2 million over 5 years? $2 million every year for 5 years to do this work. How did they know? They had, obviously, just done it. Now, this information, God wants to come out. How do I know that for certain? Because it was only this way that I found these contracts. I thought I was done. You know how sometimes you think you're done and God thinks something else? So I go to the library to get 2 congressional records references. That's it. That's all I need. I'm done, I figured. So I get a library pass to the government documents office. I go to the library. There's a big librarian there. He's 6'3". He's about 300 pounds. This guy's got a sophisticated air of library science all about him, you know. So I show him my pass. I said, I wonder if you could help me. Here's my references. I need to get these 2 congressional records. He says, follow me. So he darts off, and this guy's fast like a linebacker. And I'm following him, flying through a set of doorways, down a hall, down a flight of steps. I'm now 10 yards behind him, and all of a sudden I hear a voice that says, stop, as loud as though I'm speaking to you now. Stop. Turn right. And now I got a problem, you see. Because this guy looks over and says, hey, where are you going? Don't mind me, I'm just going to have a look over here. His voice says, walk. He says, no, your congressional records are over here. I say, don't mind me, I'm just going to have a quick look over here. He says, no, your congressional records are this way. I said, look, I'm just going to have a quick look over here, just don't mind. I won't do anything wrong. He says, that's not how you do research. I said, fine, thank you, I'm just going to have a quick look over here. I hear his voice say, walk. I'm walking. He says, okay, he gets frustrated. He says, okay, I'll go get your congressional records. So I'm walking. I'm following this voice. It says, walk, slow, stop. I stop. It says, turn left. It says, walk. I'm now walking down an aisle of about 60, 70 yards long, 8-foot-high stacks on both sides, hundreds of thousands of volumes on both sides. This voice says, walk. I'm walking. It says, slow. It says, slow. Stop. Look down, left, knee high. I look down, left, knee high. They're the words. Special Virus Cancer Program. Project reports, 1971. Pop into my face. I said, I opened this thing up. It just happened to open up the thumb. Okay, miracle. Open up. Lytton Bionetics Research. Project summary reports contained all of the names, all of the organizational structure, the affiliations, the academic affiliations, what they did, when they did it, how they did it, including how much U.S. taxpayer money they paid. We paid for it. Our parents paid for it. So I want to share with you that this is all part of a great plan, and I'm privileged. It is such a blessing and a gift for me to be able to be here today and share this information with you. I believe that because of your prayers and the prayers of tens of thousands of people all over this world, I am still here to share this information. Because many of you thought, aren't you afraid for your life? How come you're still alive, Horowitz? A better question, higher quality question, because it's the questions that we ask ourselves at any given moment. The quality of the questions determine the quality of the outcomes that we are able to produce in life. So the higher quality question in this regard is, what is the risk to one human being or one career in comparison to the potential benefit to humanity for bringing this information out and sharing it with others? So, thank you. Thank you. So, as Danny has so very wonderfully named this a crusade. This is a crusade, and it is no accident that you are here to join us in this crusade and be here, because you now have seen with your own eyes and you have heard with your own ears, and you will be blessed, as I assure you, with God's presence, with the angel protections, to go out and share this important information with those who are like-minded and as equally open. You will therefore be able to save some people. So thank you so much. It has been a privilege and a pleasure to be here. God bless. Thank you.
Na muthikiriria wona tari itherori thaici microwave iria cie booster inere cigeikia hinya ucio wayo wa thitima ri ni cirathie cigakora waya cia thitima cikiranite ugo barabara kana citwaranite na barabara iraingirana nacio tondu rimwe mundu uri thi wa thitima ona ya muciri mundu arakigwa ndari biu riu ona we gwaku mucii ri ni urona wona wahoria thitima ri ukaigwa ta wacoko ni thayo Merilini no wonete uguo
ni nyonete uguo ona he andu harakinya kaigua kuhoria thitima wikare uguo nduma-ine
na nie ne ngwathirira andu ni machaji thimo na nginya onokoro ni toshi muthenya tondo tuko thitima onera ko nyinge muno nayo ko ne guchajire thimo igakorwo ni yoire mwaki yani betiri yake ri eigite mwaki muru riu igaikare gigucinaga uguo niguo ndacokire kumenya
ona he andu harakinya karorera thimo ha
ukarerera thimo haraihu eni riu ohoro we hau thitima riu ne thukie ne microwave o tukiaragia Marilyn githuko maugaga atiriri it has been weaponized na gutikire handu hatari thitima winya uria urugamagirira uinge witu ri naguo no kunyarirwo ranyarirwo kuri athuri na anake aitu Marilyn githe nduko no ndo ne munene muno eni no muhaka tuthie tuhoe no muhaka tuthie twire Ngai tondo ona maundu mangi ginya githurano kiu tutikiukane tugugikinya kuo angikoro rate eno ya microwave guthio
na tondu ithu tuikarite ni to wa Ngai kwenda ni nguri andu itu matukeyumirie ingi tuhoe nigetha Ngai ahote gutugarurira maundu na tuwe hinya wa kuhurana na maria marabatara kuhuranwo namo
neguo andu aria moyaga ngari Nairobi hari haku studio 1 hau nyunjure wa Kencom niho ngari cikoragwo icia guthiururuka kirima koguo andu a Nairobi mumenye mugagikorwo hau rucine tene nigetha tugithiururuke kirima na twire Ngai mathina maya mothe maria president aratwirire na maria nawe ureyonera nginya makahutia maisha maku kuratuika ngari ne nyinge muno na andu makeyumiria hau tene biu na tigiti ne ngiri imwe ni tuthie ituthathaiye Ngai twi hamwe no ndenda gukumereria na ngwire atiriri thie Kirinyaga uhoe Ngai ni undu mogwati maria tuturite twerekeirio nguma 1960 ni mo magwati maria riu urona aciari itu mathiete na cancer ukona nginya murimo ta asthma ni ukirite muno ukona cancer nayo ni ukirite muno na maundu maya matiari ku thiine wa Africa no gukorwo ati turi muoyo muthiri ithwe ni ithwe mboto iria ingithie kithiuruka Kirinyaga iri mboto nene muno ya andu kwamba kumwira thank you ni undu turi muoyo bururini uyu na ria keri andu aitu ari othe mathiete ni undu wa kuragwo ni undu wa mirimo ri Ngai witu amaiguire tha necoke kwira Ngai atiriri kuria guothe Africa egereirio ni mawe Ngai ni wo mituritie kuringana na uria ndagitari yo arauga ri ni gukiuga twakibangirwo guthira biu tondu ni arauga wega HIV ni thuraga tiete ni akira mundu na muno mundu muiru ri ni we yendete kunyita na yathondeketwe nyite mundu muiru koguo ri tucamanie Kirinyaga uririkane mathukio twanathukio na kuria guothe tumite magwati maria muothe ngutarire na ni uramona to gutire family one imwe itari yahutio ni murimo ta wa HIV riu ri tuthie twire Ngai thank you na kumwira athio na mbere guturuwira tondu maundu maria tuonete Africa ni manenema tariki 27 December ni ithue na Ngai witu tondu riu Africa iri ta bururi wa andu airu ukunyitikana mathina maingima na no Ngai ungituruta haha
Ngai we inyata wakunewera gikuyo